You are very welcome to OTB's Classic Game Club here on Virgin Media Sport. It is Champions League finals weekend, and today we are reviewing possibly the greatest final of them all, Liverpool against AC Milan in the 2005 decider in Istanbul. The game itself is coming up right here on Virgin Media Sport at 7 o'clock this evening. But for the next little while, we're going to be going through a range of categories to review the 05 final. We're going to have moment of the match, we're going to have our secret man of the match and our sliding doors moments, and plenty more besides as well. It's all going to be done in the company of Gilroy and Joe Molloy. And Ger, we'll start with you. May 25th, 2005. I presume it was one of the first late nights here in OTB Towers.
Yeah, totally. It was, well, the show obviously has to go on to take account of the penalties. I'm pretty sure we blasted through to whatever was on at 10 o'clock, whatever is in the Tom Dunn slot now. And we just stayed on air. It was like, I'm sorry, there's penalties on. We're not coming off air because it had been such a dramatic night.
Yeah, unbelievable. Joe, this is like one of the things that everybody remembers where they were when they were watching this. What sort of situation were you in your life when all this stuff was happening in Istanbul?
At home with the family, with a Liverpool supporting brother, both watching him and watching the match.
How insufferable was that?
Well, for the first 45 minutes, it wasn't that insufferable, I have to say. And half-time was fairly glum. It was hard, even for a mainly Manchester United house, not to start supporting Liverpool during that second half, to be honest.
It was a victory for everybody, really, seeing this happen. And we'll get into this over the next little while about how this really did not need a 3-0 comeback for this to be a fairly remarkable win for a team in a Champions League final. We'll get straight into it and get into some of the contextual elements of this game. So just to set the scene here, I think it's fair to say, and everybody will remember this, that Liverpool are far from the best team in England at this point in 2005. They finished 5th in the Premier League this season, 37 points behind Chelsea. But they have beaten Chelsea in the one that matters, that is that Champions League semi-final and that goal by Luis Garcia. So up until this point, things had also been pretty crazy for Liverpool in the Champions League. People will remember Gerrard's goal in the 3-1 win against Olympiacos to get them out of the group. Bayer Leverkusen, perhaps less remembered, but that's who they had in the last 16. And then a quarter-final win over Juventus, an absolutely star-studded team. They beat them 2-1 in the first leg, but then they're missing Gerrard for the second leg, missing Didi Hamann, and Xabi Alonso basically cannot walk. And Rafa Benitez just puts him into a holding midfield role, but they still hold out, qualify. As I've mentioned then, Chelsea, which sees them through to the final, up against an AC Milan side, lads, which is absolutely unbelievable on paper. But their route to the final was like this. European champions 2 years previously, of course. In the last 16, they beat Manchester United with back-to-back 1-0 wins after topping their group. Quarter-final, it's that derby against Inter Milan. You might remember it was abandoned after a flare was thrown and hits Dida, and the game gets abandoned due to crowd trouble, but they had a 2-goal cushion anyway and they progress. And then PSV Eindhoven give them a massive scare in the semi-final, but they managed to scrape through, and here we are in the final. And Joe, I don't think anybody expected this to be a great footballing final. As I say, the back-to-back 1-0 wins against Manchester United were a staple of this AC Milan side.
No, it's true. Nobody really thought this would be good. Dull and goalless was generally the expectation. Not so much that AC Milan weren't a really good footballing side. It's just that Liverpool under Rafa Benitez were exceptionally good at shutting down games. Like I did not enjoy those Juventus-Liverpool games or the Liverpool-Chelsea games. I know they were full of drama. I'm sure if you're a fan and thoroughly invested in them, they were amazing. But to watch Liverpool at that stage, it wasn't joyous football. They were really average. I mean, you can't overstate it. They didn't, I mean, when they're lifting the trophy, we're not even sure if they're allowed back in to defend their title. They finished 5th in the league. Everton pipped them. But Rafa Benitez was turning out to be a bit of a genius when it came to cup football and setting up a side to beat a better side. I mean, he'd come from Valencia. He'd won the league twice there. And we were beginning to see what he could do with the team. And with just a sprinkling of genius, not least a Gerrard in there. They were able to just pull these results out of the bag. But we all fully expected this was going to be, if Liverpool were going to win it, 1-0. And it would be that kind of a job. And then Maldini scores in the first minute and suddenly everything changes.
The Liverpool team that night was Dudek in goals, a back four of Finnan, Hupia, Carragher and Traore. Xabi Alonso in holding midfield with Luis Garcia, Gerrard and Risa. Obviously, Garcia and Risa, according to the team sheet, as wing-backs, not in practice whatsoever, really. Kewell just in front of them, and then Barosh up front. Gerrard, like I think everybody's can see here what this Liverpool side was made of. It was Steven Gerrard, it was Xabi Alonso, and around that, not a whole lot to speak about, especially in attack.
Yeah, and in defence, I think because Jamie Carragher is such a good and famous TV pundit and played football for so long that people forget that he was like the 6th or 7th best English centre back playing in England at that time. It was never a significant shout for him to be the starting centre back for England because he was behind Terry and Ferdinand and a bunch of others at various stages in his career. So like he was grand. He plays really well in the second half of this game. Sami Hyypiä, I mean, very lucky not to get sent off. We can talk about that a little bit later on. Finnan gets pulled off at half time, and Jimmy Traore, they go at him straight from the start. So the fact that this was a team that people expected to be defensively solid was remarkable in and of itself. And then when you look at the rest of what's there, like there's a great piece from The Athletic where they talk about Harry Kewell, and it seems as if Rafa Benitez has somehow talked himself into the belief that Harry Kewell was a cross between all of the best parts of Cristiano Ronaldo and all of the best parts of Lionel Messi, when in fact, actually, he was this brittle, very lacking in confidence, occasionally decent footballer. And the whole team had been built to try and have him be the player who unlocks that back four that Milan have, which is star-studded. I would argue definitely the fullbacks are over the hill as fullbacks at that point.
In the performance, though, I'm not sure if that's the case. We'll get into that in just a moment. But just to go back on what you're saying about Harry Kewell, like to quote Jamie Carragher, he says, "I'm not sure he's the player Rafa thinks he is." That clearly Rafa Benitez has had this unbelievable view of Harry Kewell that other people within the Liverpool dressing room just didn't share. Why was this?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, like Kewell was very talented and was part of that Leeds side who had obviously done incredibly well under O'Leary and reached the semi-final of the Champions League. But then he had a down year, and then the injuries had begun to kick in, and he picks him for this, the biggest of games. And like I think it emerges, the picture emerges certainly of Benitez in that season as being somebody who keeps everybody guessing. Didi Hamann finds out an hour before kickoff that he's not playing. This despite the fact that he'd been a very important player up to that point, and obviously had played in a World Cup, had come from German football where he was unbelievably respected and would be expected to deal with the occasion in a way that a lot of those Liverpool players, frankly, just do not deal with the occasion in that first half in particular. Like, I know we're going to talk about the tactical switches later on, but part of it is also just that they're like, oh my God, it's the Champions League final. That's an AC Milan side who are on the verge of becoming a dynastically great team. One of those teams that you would speak about forever as one of the European teams, along with the Bayern team in the 70s, the Milan team of the late 80s. If you think about it, they've just won one 2 years ago, and in 2 years' time, largely the same side are going to win again. If they'd won this, we would be talking about this group of players as one of the all-time great Milan sides, and maybe we should be.
100%. I sometimes find when we're going back through some of these games and you look at the team sheet, there is often a name or two where you're like, oh, okay, so it's only the sepia-tinted view of hindsight which makes this team a lot better in the recesses of my mind than it really is. But you look at this AC Milan team, and that is not the case whatsoever. You've got Dida in goal, a back four of Cafu, Stam, Nesta and Maldini. Now, okay, the point about the ages here. Cafu is 34, Stam is 32, Nesta is 29, Maldini is 36. Cafu and Maldini both have summer birthdays, by the way. They're basically 35 and 37, let's face it. You've got Pirlo in front of them, you've got Gattuso and Seedorf in front of him, Kaka then behind Shevchenko and Crespo up front. It's a sensational team. If Liverpool go out and win this 1-0, Joe, it is still one of the greatest Champions League final wins. It didn't need the comeback.
I'd forgotten how brilliant the Milan team was. I really had. And as Ger said, they should have had 3 Champions League in 5 years. They should be one of the great European sides. Alas, it's 2 in 5 years, which is still incredible. And it's just so beautifully balanced. I mean, that middle three of Pirlo, Seedorf and Gattuso is as good as anything around. Kaka in front of them. And then Shevchenko and Crespo in front of Kaka. And I thought... So you might look at that and say, well, they'll lack width. But I thought Maldini and Cafu were brilliant. Like, Maldini plays until he's 41. The last 5 minutes of extra time, Cafu is still one of the few players bombing around. The Milanello lab has them all in great shape. I think they are still not quite peak of their powers, but definitely not over the hill. Like Maldini is going to captain them to another Champions League final win. I know it from centre back, but certainly that day they gave the team the balance out wide. So if you look at Pirlo, Seedorf and Gattuso, you might say they might be caught out wide. That doesn't happen, and it's because Maldini and Cafu are still playing brilliant football, and that allows them to have Kaka with Shevchenko and Crespo. They're two of the scariest triangles all linked together that you can come up against. And I mean, you talk about Rafa, and he had emerged as this unbelievable tactician. The Kuhl thing is just fascinating. If you skip ahead to 07 for a second, the Liverpool midfield three there, because he learned the lesson, is Alonso sitting with Mascherano and Gerrard in front of those two. And it's because I suspect Rafa's worst night, his worst 45 minutes as a manager, comes in this game. And when you watch this game, it all hinges on the midfield. And there was a piece with Jamie Carragher and Rafa Benitez on Monday Night Football a couple of years ago. And it's a fascinating prism to watch this game through, because Carragher, in as respectful a way as possible, is like trying to get into Benitez's head. Like, he's respectfully asking again and again, what were you thinking? And so when you watch this game, he thinks I mean, it's an attacking move. It's unlike Rafa against Juve and Chelsea. He thinks Kuhl alongside Barros, with Gerrard bombing on and maybe Alonso joining up, is really going to unlock this Milan defence. And it just transpires that Gerrard, not surprisingly, doesn't have the discipline to hold the midfield at times when he should. If Alonso goes forward, Gerrard needs to sit. That doesn't happen. And you're leaving the ball to Kaka with his head up and Shevchenko and Crespo ahead of him. There's a moment on 30 minutes when you're watching this game when Liverpool are pushing forward. Gerrard and Alonso are nowhere to be seen. It falls to Kaka. He runs. Shevchenko scores the goal. It's ruled offside. And you will see Jamie Carragher. I mean, this is like kind of Leinster Senior League stuff, screaming at Gerrard. Like he's kind of waiting. He's like throwing his hands and completely vacated the midfield. And that Rafa didn't foresee this, that he didn't see that Kaka was the key man. It's really incredible. And when in the second half, we can get onto it, but when they go to Alonso, Hamann and Gerrard as a 3 in a 3-5-2, it's hard to think of a game where the tactics played such a decisive role. I absolutely accept Ger's point about Liverpool not dealing with the occasion, and when Milan score first, that's going to settle them after a minute. But suddenly Liverpool go from a first half where they're all 30 yards away from each other and looking very average to loads of options on the ball, like the numbers matching up incredibly well. I had always thought Hamann had changed the game. That was my memory, that Hamann must have come on and with his German experience and class and nous had somehow packed this game up into his back pocket and dictated things. He doesn't really. It's the unlocking of Gerrard in front of Alonso and Hamann and behind Garcia and Barros, which is just the turning of the game. But like the tactical midfield thing is a great way to watch this game. Just watch Gerrard, watch Alonso, and look at Kaka waiting. And it's a ticking time bomb. And they get a few warnings. They get a couple of warnings, and then invariably the thing blows up in their face.
Well, let's get straight into our moments of the match then, because that segues nicely into our first moment, which is a hard one to kind of pin down. It is the moment that is this AC Milan performance in the first half. I think best exemplified by the goal where Kaka plays a through ball that takes out 3 Liverpool men, glides beautifully around their back, the 2 central defenders at that point, although I think Jimmy Traore is in a central position and Crespo just takes it and chips it over Dudek. A sublime finish, an even better pass. And how that sums up the entirety of the first half, where AC Milan, using their incredible gifts in midfield, were relatively direct. As in, Kaka is playing balls that are 20 yards long. Pirlo is fairly direct as well, but going over the top more often. Like, my question is why that doesn't happen a lot more in the second half. I'm not in Istanbul. I don't actually have the division in front of me to see why that was. You'd assume that there was a little bit more than just a personnel shift from Rafa Benitez here that dissuaded AC Milan from continuing to do this in the second half. So, Ger, why were AC Milan so good in this first half?
Everything played into it. Sorry, Ger, go on.
To be honest, I think a lot of this has to do with the attitude of the two sides as well, and the fact that Milan believe they have the game won, and they do have the game won at 3-0, and that I buy the improved shape giving Liverpool a foothold in the second half. But also, if you watch how all of a sudden Milan are just kind of there, it's a training match. They're 3-0 up and they're cruising, and then the fluky sequence of goals happens in the way that they do. So I thought they killed Liverpool in that first half. I know Carragher says, "Oh, it didn't feel like we were a 3-0 worse team, but it could have been 5. I wonder if VAR would have given that Shevchenko goal, because it looked like he was just about onside. And I think that maybe part of Carragher giving out to Gerrard is like, I better do something here. It wasn't just me playing him onside, because I think it was. The reason they're so good is because Kaka is absolutely sensational here. Like, I know people say this isn't his peak. He doesn't make I don't know, you had looked up where he finishes in the Ballon d'Or that year.
Yeah, so he finishes 9th in the Ballon d'Or voting that year, which is incredible.
This is before his knees stop him being Kaka. Like, I legitimately think this is the best pass I've ever seen. Like, it's up there with anything I've ever seen Zidane do. It's up there with any through balls that you've ever seen, because it's so pinpoint and so perfect. And the finish, obviously, from Crespo turns it into it's a grace point. It's like a beautiful exclamation mark, where Jerzy Dudek, I think, is absolutely sensational in this game, right? And he's doing everything you're supposed to do. And there's one thing that he can't get, and it's the chip over his shoulder. But it's the ability for Crespo to run as fast as he possibly can, not to have to break stride because of the curve of the pass. I went back and watched it again, and it's actually Pirlo who intercepts with a one-touch volley to give it to Kaka. And it's one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. So you can see how something like that is going to devastate you. You can see how conceding a goal in the very first minute completely blows up. Mike Tyson, the plan, when you think about it, that Carragher is trying to get explained to him all these years later by Rafa, makes a little bit of sense. Like, if you think about how they're playing essentially 3 centre-backs, and one of them is nearly 600 years of age at left-back, and you have this supposed to be fast-running guy and a lot of pace, it makes a little bit of sense. You're going to try and keep the ball up in that area, and you've got a good passer in Xabi Alonso who might be able to, but then suddenly you're 1-0 down. And the next time the ball breaks in the penalty area, Jaap Stam is having a shot. Like, what is going on here? How do we find ourselves in this situation? So I think panic sets in, and it's panic against, a Pirlo and Gattuso, who are 12 months away from winning the World Cup for Italy. So they're cresting to their peak. Seedorf, I think, is probably coming to the end of his peak, which has been a decade of being an absolutely sensational midfielder as well. And you've got the magic of Kaka's vision and genius and athleticism. You forget how fast he was.
I like Joe. Part of me disagrees with what you were saying about Didi Hamann a moment ago, just in the context of what Gerrard is saying there about Kaka and about allowing AC Milan to run riot. I really think of Hamann as playing in that first half. It's not a 3-0 deficit to Liverpool. I think that it's a situation where we might not have noticed Didi Hamann do anything except for just fill the space that essentially turned into wide open acres of space. Like, I would love to go back and actually just have a camera tracking Xabi Alonso to see exactly where he is at all points during the period where they're going down 3-0. It's incredible, really, that they would set up in such a way that they would almost pressurise Gattuso, Seedorf and Pirlo more, have Shevchenko and Crespo looked after via Carragher and Hilpia, but then their best player, one of the best players in the world, is in the 10 position, completely unmarked. So there isn't anybody actually detailed to look after Kaka at this point. It is an unbelievable oversight on Rafa Benitez's part. And, like, it's not down as one of our sliding doors moments, but had Liverpool not won this, you wonder where Rafa Benitez's reputation would then have gone after this first half performance from Liverpool.
Yeah, he would have been destroyed. he just really would have been. And as I agree with Ger, like, there's obviously benefits to what he tried to do, and he imagined Kuhl holding the ball up, doing some very nice things, and Gerrard running on and Barros there, and you could see how good things would happen. But even when Kuhl gets injured after 10 minutes, he doubles down. So this is where the argument falls a touch flat. Say for a second he's fallen into this belief that Harry Kuhl, who's only really played in the Carling Cup final, is going to do magical things. And you want to base the formation on your belief that Kuhl can do something really special in this final with Gerrard around him. Then when Kuhl gets injured after 10 minutes, you don't move Louis Garcia into the exact same position and bring on Smeeser in the right wing. I mean, that's where he had a chance 10, 12 minutes in to have a look at this thing. Kuhl's coming off. How much do I believe in this system? I've even had a little look at Kaka, and he's wandering around. I can see what Kaka's trying to do. And he looked at his bench. He saw Hamann. He saw Smeeser, and he said, Smeeser, on you go, and we're going to stick with this formation. Garcia in, and he doesn't fare much better than Harry Kuhl does, to be honest. He would have been slaughtered for sure, and in that Monday Night Football, it does the rounds on Twitter if people want to have a look. Like, Jamie Carragher goes back to him a few times and he's like, but just one more thing on the formation. What were you... put it this way, in its most simplest terms. Rafa had said to Gerrard, look, you run around too much. This was his big criticism of Gerrard, and Gerrard is on the record as saying this. So he knows that Gerrard lacks that little bit of discipline because he's so brilliant and he can do everything, he likes to roam. So really, what I would love to know is what conversation happened with Alonso and Rafa. Did Rafa say, look, you need to be aware Stephen is going to push on and bomb and do lots of things. You have to sit and watch Kaka. It doesn't look in the first half like that conversation happened, but I do accept the possibility that everybody in that team lost their heads given the early goal and the situation. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are counting their lucky stars after that final. I think Rafa's first in the queue.
Yeah.
The Smeacher substitution is madness. It's absolute mad. Smeacher was leaving. This was his last ever game for Liverpool, and they knew that. They didn't trust him enough to give him another contract. And it's like, okay, we're 1-0 down. We're getting completely overrun. And I'm going to stick on Vladimir Smeacher. Smeacher himself is shocked that he's in the matchday squad, let alone first sub. It is absolute madness on Benitez's part. I have no idea what he was thinking.
The other thing, just to touch on from the first half, and it's very noticeable watching it back. I like to say when we're watching these games back, you kind of... So, for example, a couple of months back, I watched the 2012 Champions League final back, and Ryan Bertrand is playing for Chelsea. It's one of these famous trivia moments about name who did the Chelsea starting team, and Ryan Bertrand steps up, and he's actually okay. You can see he's not at the same level as everybody else on occasion, but he does well. Jimmy Traore is obviously the person on this occasion who's in the Ryan Bertrand role, or in the least known of the starting 11 anyway, when it comes to the Liverpool starting 11. So you say, well, he must be better than I thought. Not the case, really, on occasion in that first half. Jimmy Traore is told to shower at half-time, but actually gets away with it because Stephen's injured. And when he's in the shower, Paco Ayestaran goes in to say, actually, Rafa's changed his mind. Finnan's actually injured. You're going out there. But really, that should have been the end of Jimmy Traore. And I'm personally delighted for him that he had the opportunity in the second half to clear Shevchenko's effort off the line and, play some part in this. But God, he's stuck out a bit here in terms of not being at the same level of that back four. Certainly not the same level as the likes of Xabi Alonso and Steven Gerrard in front of him.
What's the very first thing Milan do? The very first thing from kickoff, what's the very first thing they do is they win a free kick on the right-hand side because they attack the weakest part of the Liverpool team, and that's where the free kick that the goal comes from. It's like, okay, let's Jimmy Traore's playing, let's go. And that's the first thing they do, and the goal comes off it, and that should be the winning of the game. You give this Milan side, who have bored their way to the 0-0 after penalties against Juve just 2 years previously in a Champions League final. From 1-0, this Milan side should have been able to keep the ball for long enough to win the game, but madness ensues.
I have often said in my life when I'm feeling a bit overawed or, in over my head with something upcoming that, well, Jimmy Traore has a Champions League medal. There's always that. So anything is possible. I had fully expected, like you, to watch this and think, we gave Jimmy a hard time. He was fine. And actually, he's so clearly below the level of every other single player on the pitch. It's staggering. It's staggering how bad he is, that he's playing at this level, and that Liverpool are navigating their way through him. And that's not to be disrespectful to him, because we're talking about the elite of the elite, but he should be nowhere near it. And I think one of the reasons Liverpool do better in the second half is that because they move to a back three, there's less reliance on Jimmy to get on the ball. Because any time in that first half, as the left back, they worked the play out to him, Risa was ahead of him, he gave it away. I mean, watch it in the first half. There's one where he's acres of space. Gerrard gives a lovely ball to him. His first touch is bad. His second touch is a tackle. He gives away a free. And you can just see the belief drain out of the whole team. So actually, one of the real benefits of moving to a 3-5-2 is Jimmy doesn't have to get on the ball anymore.
Yeah, it's a good point. And that is, I think we've touched on a lot of this, our second moment of the match, which is half-time. Like we've mentioned Traore and U-turn on that. It's the formation change as well. It's Haman being out on the pitch, being told to warm up. There's a little bit of confusion as well when he sees Traore coming out to the pitch, but then he's told that actually Finnan is injured. You can sometimes overplay the importance of halftime at times like this, or the importance of, say, the atmosphere in the ground. I think Gerrard says that they perhaps heard "You'll Never Walk Alone" when they come back out from the dressing room through the tunnel and all that, but it doesn't have an overbearing impact. Like it is some of the material changes that we saw in the first half that really arrested the slump. But Like, I'm not sure what stuck out to you from the halftime decisions, or what exactly it was that changed prior to Gerrard's header that you realised that something might change here.
I don't know. I actually think that in commentary, Des says that AC Milan won't want the halftime break to come, and never has something more true been said. Like, if they played 90 minutes non-stop, it could have been 11-0. Like, I think it's just about, it's a little bit to do with complacency, I think. Like, there's that really interesting comment that Gerrard talks about. He wasn't nervous. He was the word anxious. I think it was, the sense was that he had a kind of foreboding about this game, and Liverpool had gone out 2 days beforehand. Normally it would be just 1 day, so they had an extra day to kill. And the pre-match press conference, he's looking over at Maldini, all suave and Italian and tanned, and $1 million smile. And there's Stevie G with his permanently furrowed brow, going, "I have the weight of the entire city on my shoulders," and he does. And like, he knows probably at that stage that they're never going to win a Premier League. He's thinking about leaving to go to Chelsea that summer. So this could be his last ever game, and it is literally. And Maldini wished good luck tomorrow. And he somehow, retrospectively, has turned this into a Michael Jordan diss. I was like, I'm going to get him wishing me. Who does he think he is wishing me good luck? I knew he thought that they were going to beat us. And I think that there's a little grain of truth there in the level of complacency that AC Milan have in the second half, where they drop so far back that they're like, this crowd, look, they've got Jimmy Traore still out here. Like, even after the first half, he's come out for the second half. There's no way that they're getting back into this game. So I think a large part of it, and also Liverpool going for it, taking the risks and deciding to, have a ridiculous Hollywood shot from 35 yards that goes into the bottom left-hand corner, when that makes no sense. It makes no sense that Smeacher is going to be calling for the ball to take a shot beforehand as well. Like, he knows he's taking that shot as soon as he gets it. And it's just the one part of the goal that the giant World Cup winning goalkeeper can't reach. And even then he reaches it. So look, I think there's a large element of fluke about all of this that we probably need to talk about a bit more than gets talked about. It's a sense of, this is fate, and it's like the transformation of one team to the other, but it's also unbelievably fluky.
There's no question about that. I think anybody who denies it, there's not a whole pile of luck here, I think is deluded. The only thing you could say is that, say, for AC Milan's second goal, there was a clear handball by Alessandro Nesta in his own box in the build-up to the goal. But outside of that, really, everything kind of falls in Liverpool's favour. Just to kind of wrap up on half-time as a moment here, and it's from this brilliant Athletic piece that you mentioned, Ger. Like, it talks about this front-page headline of, like, Gazzetta dello Sport, I think maybe the day after, and it says, in translated English, Milan were already celebrating at half-time. And good old Jimmy Traore was on the record here, kind of hamming up this idea that AC Milan were celebrating at half-time. But Traore came out later and said that there were signs. It wasn't that the Milan players who started the game, it was more the attitude of the subs and the people on their bench. But Carlo Ancelotti afterwards was then saying that this actually hurt way more than the defeat itself, seeing that we were celebrating at half-time. And the best quote is from Gennaro Risa, who says, "On the way to the dressing room, I heard Gattuso shouting. I don't understand Italian at that point, but it was obvious that he was celebrating." So I think there's probably a little bit of a projection here where it's like, oh, those lads are celebrating. They're probably just being really Italian and loud and discussing tactics. There's probably no celebrating going on whatsoever. But these Liverpool players managed to turn it into something that gave them a little bit of a benefit in the second half. Which brings us nicely onto our final moment, which again is kind of one moment to talk about a wider thing, which is the Liverpool comeback. And we'll talk about Gerrard's header. This actually looked a whole lot different to me watching it back, because I remember this thing almost taking the net off the goalposts at the time, thinking this was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen in terms of power. But even Gerrard himself in the aftermath said he didn't go for power whatsoever. It was all about placing it into the top corner. But still, what a beautiful header.
It's so good, isn't it? It's not a million miles off Roy Keane Juventus a few years earlier, if you're talking about captain's goal and dragging a team back into it. He turns his neck muscles so much. I think that's the delusion of power, because he's arching his back and he's kind of throwing his head at it. And but again, like, if you're talking about half-time and the game changing, suddenly you have your best player, one of the best players on the pitch. He's in the middle of the two triangles, Alonso and Haman to Gerrard, and then it's Gerrard with Garcia and Barros. So that header, when you're watching it in a few minutes' time, It's Sheahan and Alonso in midfield passing back and forth. They give it out to Risa, who swings it in for Gerrard. Same with the penalty. Gerrard's empowered to run forward and win the penalty with all that athleticism and dynamism and brilliance. For me, the two memories I had 15 years on in advance of watching the game, or three maybe, Dudek's saves, but Crespo's finish, which Ger kind of perfectly described, and the Gerrard header. I thought the Gerrard header still stood up pretty well, I have to say. I thought it was still pretty special.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was a bullet of a header, but it wasn't. It was just perfectly placed, and I don't really think Dida can get to it at this point. Like, I think in a way, Cafu blocking the first cross helps Gianarni Risa. If we really want to delve into the realms of flukiness here, this is a huge stretch, I'll accept. But the fact that the ball comes flying back at Risa again, it gives him a nice ability to get the ball in so quickly, which, as Gerrard says himself, all he had to do was direct it because the cross was so bloody good. And then we get on to the second goal, which is your boy Vladimir Smisser. And I'm not sure, did he pick up on this? Where is Kaka during this goal? Did he pick up on this?
No.
This is Kaka's fault. The reason why AC Milan lost to Liverpool in the 2005 Champions League final is because of Kaka. He may have been the best player in the world and actually is had underrated at this point, but it was his fault they lost this Champions League final. The ball comes in from a throw-in. It goes from Xabi Alonso to Didi Hamann to Vladimir Smisser. Smicer's got all the time in the world, and Berosh gets out of the way, and it's at bottom of Dida's net. But the man who is closing down Hamann at this point should be Kaka. Kaka is bent down and fixing his shin pads at this point instead of closing down Didi Hamann, who is a vital cog in this very simple move. Kaka, it's on you. Like he says, I think he was talking in like 2014-15, saying it's still a heartbreaking defeat. He didn't mention shin pad gate, and I'm not sure this gets the sort of coverage it deserves, folks, to be quite honest with you.
That's damning. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten, by the way, with all these goals, how quickly they came. You know, like the Smisser one is so quick after the Gerrard goal, and it's such a freebie. That's the thing about this. The Smisser goal is where I think they went from thinking as a team, we're done, we're toast, to, geez, what a freebie. Maybe we're back in this. That felt to me at the time, and watching again, like when you thought, actually, something mad's about to happen here.
Yeah, well, I was certainly at that moment. Like, even just, I know it's a hard thing to call when you're rewatching it, but I thought Gerrard's header was, I thought that was it, to be honest, and the celebration. Like, what was it for you, Gerrard? Did you believe until it happened?
No, not until Xabi Alonso left-footed skies the penalty rebound into the net. Like, he misses the penalty to make it 3-3, and Nest is just there. Nest is just there to like stop it, and that would have been, oh wow, what a valiant effort that was at a comeback. Like, you can't come back from 3-0 down against an Italian side with like that defence. You just can't. I often wonder about Gerrard though, like, for all the criticism that he's got in this part of the world, in particular in Ireland, about not being the archetypal midfielder who can do all the things, like exactly what you said about Rafa Benitez and you run around too much. I wonder if there's any other players in world football who could have put this team, a team as poor as this, on their shoulders in the way that he manages it. Because it's a weird thing that he does. Like, it's almost a style that he runs around the place with. His giant shoulders and his kind of lumbering and massive strides somehow inspired the whole crowd to believe that anything is possible, when it's not. Like, this isn't possible. This isn't supposed to be something that you can dream of coming back from. And the header's ridiculous. Like, it's one of the most athletic headers you're ever going to see. It's like Jordan-esque, the way he gets up and hangs in the air. Like, there is a power in those neck muscles, as you're saying, Joe, that like, I think somehow feels like it's a goal and a half you've conceded.
Yeah, I totally agree on the Gerrard point. I think we really underrate him in this country, partly out of devotion to Roy Keane as much as anything. He is just a phenomenon. You know, Michael Jordan is talked about as a fictional character in The Last Dance. Gerrard, every bit as much. How many games has he performed a miracle? I mean, we talk about 99 and Roy Keane. How many Gerrard games, even off the top of your head? This one is just phenomenal. You think of the West Ham FA Cup final. You think of Olympiacos already in this very campaign. What can Gerrard not do? So the received wisdom, and it comes via, I would say in the main, John Giles, because of his place in punditry in this country, that Gerrard can't dictate a game the way Keane could. Okay, I'll bow to that for a second. But like, look at everything else Gerrard could do. He literally could do everything. He's the best right back in Europe for about 20 minutes here in this game. He is I mean, here he's 24 years old, second youngest captain in the history of the European Cup to lift the trophy. Carries that team through multiple seasons. He can shoot. I mean, like nobody's business. His range of passing is phenomenal. His athleticism is pretty much unmatched, you would have to say, for the peak of his career. He's so determined. You're talking Keane's determination. Gerrard is in that category. He can tackle. Good around the dressing room, you get the sense. I mean, there's literally nothing he can't do. He is. I mean, Pat Nevin is on the show regularly with us. He thinks Gerrard's the best midfielder that we've seen in the Premier League, the most complete. He could do everything. And I do think we actually underrate him a touch, as I said, partly out of this, well, he couldn't control a game business. How fair is that? I don't know. I think that's a little bit overstated.
So I went to watch Villa play Liverpool and got accreditation and went down afterwards. And it was one of those magnificent Gerrard performances. It actually finishes, does it finish 1-1 or do they win? But after 70 minutes, Gerrard gets taken off. And he's given one of those performances where his right foot is mesmeric, and he kind of crushes Villa's spirit at various stages by tracking back and just killing somebody who's like the left winger, who's like a little bit and Gerrard just crushes him physically and then gets everybody up. And, you know, it's away from home, and it's one of those games that if you're going to be competitive in the league, you have to win. And afterwards, I remember this, like Brian Glanville is sitting at the front. You're like, oh, there's Brian Glanville, you know, one of the most famous football journalists of all time. And he just immediately, first question goes, Steven Gerrard was sensational today. Rafa, he must have been injured. And Benitez says, no, it was tactical. Benitez didn't think he could do it either. And we were all going, what? Look at that performance. He was sensational. Benitez, he wouldn't fit within the tactical constraints, partly because he grew up on a team that was rubbish. I think, imagine him growing up in that Man United side where he was passing the ball to Scholes and Beckham and Giggs, and he had a specific role, or maybe that wouldn't have been his role. Maybe he actually would have been right behind Dwight York or Andy Cole, and he would have been as sensational as he was the year he was behind
Torres.
Yeah. But Benitez didn't trust him either. That's the thing.
It's impossible to not make the comparison to 99. I know it was the last game we did here in the Classic Game Club, but it is like a mirror image. As you say, you've got the header, but when Gerrard goes to right back for extra time, it is very reminiscent of Roy Keane against Juventus in 99, where it's like, where is his body now? Where is he going to show up? Where is he going to retrieve the ball? Where will he then run to? They are very, very similar performances. And I think you're right, Joe. I think that the biggest testament to how underrated Steven Gerrard is that I would have felt uncomfortable with making that comparison before the game. But actually having watched the full thing, I think it's right up there and possibly better, probably better, I would say, than Roy Keane's performance against Juventus in 99 this night for Steven Gerrard.
I wouldn't argue with you. It's certainly more eye-catching. I haven't watched Keane 99 in full in quite a long time. I saw bits of it recently. I know you guys were doing the Classic Game Club here a couple of weeks ago, and I watched about 15, 20 minutes. And it wasn't Roy Keane's best 15, 20 minutes either. I mean, to be honest, I was watching it and Juventus were really good and they were dominant at that stage. So it maybe wasn't the best 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, I think there is a lack of comfort in Ireland with saying Steven Gerrard is right beside Roy Keane and in many aspects of the game much better. Now, he's clearly not as fascinating a figure or as dominant a figure, and, you know, we're just going to have that relationship with Roy. But I agree. I think you're in a pub and you're whispering it quietly that Steven Gerrard on his day definitely puts in better performances than Roy Keane on other days. Can we agree on that? Because he absolutely does.
Yeah. In 700 games, is it like 350 better games versus 250? I don't know.
351. 351.
If you've got a magic checkbook, Joe, and you can sign one player at their peak, are you signing Roy Keane or Steven Gerrard for your team?
Oh, that's an unbelievable question.
I think they could play together. I think they could play together in a way that... Well, it's not, because remember, England couldn't find a way to make Lampard and Gerrard work together. Remember, the whole country was too dumb to find a way to get these two brilliant footballers into the same team. Whereas actually, I think they're complementary pieces. And that's the issue, I think, about the whole... Gerrard is not as good as Keane at being the metronome to control the pace of a game over the course of 90 minutes. But Keane's not as good at ripping a game up and grabbing it by the scruff of the neck with 25 minutes left to go and deciding it. And they're they're actually totally different things, really, but they're complementary. So I would say if you've got the checkbook, it depends. Do you have a really potent strike force already, or is your defense weak? Do you need somebody to be that buffer and to control games?
That didn't answer my question.
But it's exactly right, though. Who do you have beside him? If you have an attacking midfielder, you buy Roy Keane. If you have more of a defensive player, you buy Steven Gerrard. So it's not just a flat Roy Keane is the answer.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll accept the cop out on this occasion. It all depends on the other parts. We've got a load.
Costs more.
He would, in fairness. We are continuing with our categories. We're getting into secret man of the match. We've gone for 3 different contenders here, lads. We've got Kaka, who we've already spoken about, really an unbelievable performer, the best AC Milan player on the pitch on the night. We should say Steven Gerrard got the actual man of the match on the night, so these are man of the match contenders that aren't called Steven Gerrard. So Kaka is number 1. The second person we want to mention is Jerzy Dudek, because Jerry, I think you said his performance is unbelievable. I think certainly the 2 defining moments late on in the game, of course, saving Shevchenko's penalty, but the 2 saves, a double save in extra time, one of the most bizarre moments that a goalkeeper's ever enjoyed, I dare say.
Yeah, and again, it is very fluky. Like, it's an excellent first save. He has no clue what's happening with the second one, but at least has the smarts to continue to be a goalkeeper and continue to protect his goal. You have to give the player credit for doing the thing you're supposed to do. But also, what the hell is Shevchenko thinking? Like, it seems to me a little bit like this is the beginning of the end for Shevchenko's confidence. I know he still scored those more goals, but you can see the bones of the player that Chelsea end up buying. Even with Crespo's first goal, where Shevchenko is through, I think he actually completely shanks that ball, which is the perfect thing that completely discombobulates the Liverpool defence. Crespo's like, what's going on? And then has to skate back and hook it in. And like, I don't know, what is Shevchenko thinking? I'm just going to hit the ball straight at the goalkeeper again, and I'm sure it'll bounce in. Just hit it anywhere, Andre. You've done this a million times, literally a million times in your life.
If anything, he hit it too well, I think, is the cliche we can easily reach for here. I think he said himself that if he hit it a bit lighter, it might have actually, I don't know, flopped off his arm or something and might have gone in. He's made some allusion to that fact in the past, that if he just hit it a bit lighter, it might have gone in. But incredible stuff from Jerzy Dudek. Our final secret man of the match contender, and Joe, this is to you, Jamie Carragher.
Yes, I suppose not so secret. Jamie Carragher's cramp is kind of one of the defining images, isn't it? And he was definitely heroic in the second half and extra time. So I wasn't actually sure in advance had Gerrard or Carragher got the man of the match, because definitely there's long periods where the camera lingers on Carragher and he's in agony, and there's one sequence where he gets cramp and gets up and kicks the ball and gets cramp again, and it's comical. But it's all the kind of it's typical Lionheart English centre half spirit coming to the fore. So it ticks a lot of boxes. I will, by the way, give honourable mention to Smeeser. I think we gave him a bit of a going over earlier, but he was good as well. And I will go down on that Maldini ship, Jer. I thought Maldini was really good in this game as well.
Coffee was bad as well.
I thought Maldini ends up getting caught out of position. Like, what's he doing for the Gerrard header? And there's another one a little bit later on where himself and Stam, he's kind of playing centre back, and Stam looks at him and goes, "No, I've got this guy." And meanwhile, the ball's in the back of the net. But look, I love Maldini. Don't get me wrong. And actually, I'm pretty sure his performance as a centre back 2 years later is excellent again. It's like, it definitely, there was the turning circle of an old oil tanker there at one stage where the ball got knocked past, and I'm like, just keep doing this. Just keep doing. I think Finn and Skin early in the game, and maybe that kind of coloured the rest of it for me. Can I just mention though about Kaka? Kaka won the game in the second half when he ran at Sami Hyypiä and got him sent off for a professional foul. Except the score was 3-0, and the referee was doing the old GA thing of, look, it's 3-0, I'm not going to send you off. Sami Hyypiä didn't even get booked. Kaka is clearly through, and it's Kaka at the peak of his powers. Like, that for me was, again, they were going back to what they were doing in the first half, and they just forgot to do it for the rest of the second half. But this is about 5 minutes in before the comeback starts, and it would have been 3-0 and a man down, and Sami Hyypiä is like, oh, no, I did it. Like, and completely gets away with it.
Yeah, it's such a good point about Kaka, like, because Carragher had been saying that he actually liked coming up against some of these Italian teams because they were a bit slow, basically, especially Inter Milan and Juventus. But Kaka, just such an outlier on that point, would absolutely zoom through you. It's good. I actually didn't even kind of cop it at that point, that actually Hupia could have been in really big danger at that point. Just on another point on Maldini, you sometimes think when you're watching these back that, well, this is the very end of Maldini, but he's back 2 years later and wins a Champions League medal. And like, you can really sense from his quotes in recent years that he really regrets not saying yes to the Italian management in 2006. Like, he might have started that final. Like, does he get in ahead of Grosso? Like, I know he was like the best player in the World Cup almost, certainly in that position in 06. So you got Grosso, Materazzi, Cannavaro and Zambrotta as their back four in the 06 World Cup final against France. Like, Maldini probably your fifth choice defender at that point, especially because he's a bit of a utility back. But still, he was definitely good enough to be part of a World Cup winning squad the following year. And this is not the end of Maldini. And I'm kind of leaning more towards Joe on that one, that the full-backs here for AC Milan were really, really good on the night. And that brings us nicely actually into 2020 vision. So this is the section where we take something from 2005 and see how well it would fit in the year 2020. And we want to start with full-backs here, but we want to start with Liverpool's full-backs. Jimmy Traore, Steve Finnan, and we could throw John Arne-Riise in here as well if we want. How well would they fit into today's game, given Liverpool's fullbacks are so unbelievably good right now?
I think John Arne-Riise is a bit of a prototype. Jimmy Traore, take Traore out, right? But John Arne-Riise actually would be not a million miles away from the athletic profile of Andy Robertson. He's got that left boot. Like, you could totally turn him into a very valuable player. And Steve Finnan, like, is an excellent, and I guess a little bit underrated in Ireland, even because he was up against Stephen Carr for so long. And he's the, successor to Gary Kelly and also Dennis Irwin. We're like, well, he's not in that class, but actually he was really good for a long period of time.
Yeah, I think we underrate him. And this isn't his best game to watch. He's clearly got some kind of injury coming into the game, and that's why he's off at half-time. The word at half-time, the physio said he could continue, but wouldn't make the full 90. And so, given the substitutions they'd made already, they had to take him off. But I think we probably do underrate Steve Finnan a little bit.
One thing we wanted to touch on here in 2020 Vision, Joe, is psychology and how the psychological makeup of some of these Liverpool players wouldn't exactly fit in today's world.
Well, it's amazing at full time when they're all interviewed. This goes against the grain of every single self-help book ever, because first Carragher, then Gerrard, then Rafa, and then Riise are all interviewed by Gabriel Clark at the time. And they're asked, did you believe? At half-time, did you believe? And their answer to a man is absolutely not. We did not believe. We didn't. It was crucial to us that we did not believe. We did not believe a thing. I think Gerrard, who's particularly obviously prone to this kind of negativity, had basically said all the way through this Champions League, we never believed. Olympiacos, Juve, Chelsea, we did not believe. So actually, I mean, where does that leave the self-help industry in that the greatest comeback of all time was fueled by a distinct and very, very thorough sense of no belief at halftime. Like, they went out saying, we have no chance in this second half. And that was brilliant. I love the honesty.
Now that you mention it, actually, famously, Rafa has to smack Gerrard down, I think before the Olympiacos game, in the press, when Gerrard is like, look, we have to concentrate in the league. There's no chance of us qualifying for next season in Europe by winning the Champions League, which, technically might actually have been true because obviously they weren't guaranteed a place in it. But and Rafa's like, what are you talking about? We've got every chance of winning this competition. So Gerrard hadn't even envisaged the possibility in his mind. And to be honest, I think that is one of the things that would separate Keane and Gerrard, is like that constant worry and anxiety that Gerrard has prevents him from fully actualizing his talent. Whereas with Keane, it's the opposite. The fear drives him on to be even better.
But does it? Like, the Gerrard who went out saying, I don't believe we can win the Champions League, A, wins the Champions League, and B, at halftime when he says, well, we definitely can't win it now, goes out and puts in one of the best performances of his career, scores the goal, drags them through. That's actually why my head's fried with this. I'm like, maybe you don't need any belief in yourself.
Well, the first half, I think he needs freedom. The first half, he has no freedom. He has the intimidation of the beautiful captain of the opposition who's won this competition already 4 times. And he's got the burden of the city, freed from the burden of expectation, free from everything, apart from the flow state of, I'm going out to play football. All of a sudden, he becomes at 1. I think there's like the inner game of tennis kind of thing going on here where he's just playing football in that second half. They're just back doing the thing that they love doing, and it's gone. So it almost doesn't matter anymore. And I would definitely read a 700-page thesis on Steven Gerrard's Champions League final, first half versus second half, and the impact of the burden of expectation and who you are and what city you're from, and knowing that you're the natural successor to Kenny Dalglish. All that stuff, I think, feeds into a fairly mediocre performance from him in the first half.
Yeah. Well, Carragher's attitude at halftime was, I just don't want this to be 6. That was his mindset going out.
Was that the attitude in Medina as well, I wonder? Like, is this actually, have the self-help books been written wrong all this time? Like, if the golfers on that occasion were like, no, we're screwed here, the US have us beaten, then this is clearly the way forward.
I mean, maybe the way we should all operate is we're going to die anyway. You know, our mortality is weighing heavily on us. It's all for nothing. So what's the point? And then go out the door.
I think that's
you're right.
That's the most inspirational thing that's ever been said in the Classic Game Club, to be quite honest. Just a quick word on the reaction and the aftermath of this game, because in this Athletic piece, there's some really heartbreaking stuff. So you've got the Liverpool parade afterwards. 750,000 people to 1 million people, depending on what you read, showed up for this parade. Liverpool City, just for context, has a population of 500,000. So over the entire population of Liverpool showed up for a parade. But Neil Mellor paints this picture of the first team flying back on one plane, and they had their partners with them, so there wasn't enough space on the plane for players who didn't make the matchday squad to fly back from Istanbul. So they flew home on a different plane, which meant that a lot of them just got back too late to actually enjoy the parade. So Neil Mellor says that he drove home to Altrincham in tears and watched everything on telly. I was still living with my mum and dad, but they were in Liverpool waiting to see me. It was a pretty sad way to finish what could have been an amazing couple of days, to be honest. How heartbreaking is that? And then Stephen Warnock was like, the parade didn't help my mood. Quite a few of us had played in big games during that Champions League campaign. Mellor, cinema upon goal, had scored important goals, but we flew back on a different plane, and the wives were allowed in the first team plane instead of us. This led us to missing the bus for the parade, driving home and watching it on Sky Sports News. It should never have happened. It was only when we came back for pre-season that we got an apology. But I didn't enjoy that summer. It made me desperate to leave, which is one of the more heartbreaking aspects of all of this.
We had Neil Mellor on the show a couple of weeks ago, and this came up, and he is still quite upset about it because it would have been his greatest moment. And the issue was separate flights for first team squad and then those who weren't in the squad. As you said, there's a delay with the baggage getting off the flight of the subs and the extra people. And then the traffic is obviously terrible getting to Melwood. Meanwhile, at Melwood, Gerrard is there with the first team squad and the trophy, and he's saying, we're not going anywhere without the other lads. You know, we're not moving. And the word comes through from the police that actually, for safety reasons, like Liverpool is humming at the moment. You just need to get going. Like, we can't just have this many people just hanging around doing nothing. And so the police said, you have to go, and you go now. And of course, there are no mobile phones. So, like, there's no way to find out where they are. And as you said, Mellor and these lads just have nothing to do but just to drive home.
And now it's 2005. There's loads of mobile phones.
Well, but Neil Mellor said there weren't. Okay, well then after, because in Korea in 2002, like, camera phones were a thing. That's true. I had a Nokia 3310 in 2001. Well, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what was going on. Maybe the reception was down. But either way, the cops
The reception might have been down, in fairness. That's like, if they're at Melwood, there's a bit where they're like, it's only Florence Cinema, Pongal, and Stephen Warnock. Neil Warnock, obviously not invited.
Just like trying to send a fax or trying to send a telegram to get in touch with your teammates. How can we, it's the year 2005, how can we possibly communicate with anybody who is not in our current location? But that's one of the other things that Neil Mellor interview, by the way, is worth checking out on Off the Ball as well. Just on a sliding doors thing. We sometimes go through a different few talking points in sliding doors, but there's only one we want to touch on here. And it is, would Steven Gerrard have left Liverpool had Liverpool not won the 2005 Champions League final? Joe, you might kick us off on this one.
It was the sliding doors moment that jumped out to me at the time and still even now. So the year before was when the Mourinho-Chelsea interest happened. Gerrard clearly was very tempted, and I think he saw the writing was on the wall. This was a serious rebuild. You look at that team. I mean, we've gone through it, and that's two. How many that team is 2, 3, 4 years away from even beginning to challenge. He's 24, going on 25. He's at his peak. He has to decide if he's signing up to a almost what could be deemed a Matt Letizia-esque career. Obviously, different scales. I think he retires now incredibly glad he didn't leave Liverpool, even though he didn't win the league. I think what he gets from the city, the esteem in which he's held, almost the guarantee maybe of being manager down the line, all of that stuff, I think he's very relieved he didn't leave. But I have no doubt the thoughts he had the previous summer would have returned with a vengeance that summer in 2005 if they had lost the Champions League. I think what the Champions League gave him was a sense of, okay, no one can say my career is anything approaching a failure. Like Champions League medal, especially in 2005, this is before, United win it again and before Chelsea win it against Bayern in that final. To be an Englishman with a Champions League medal is still a major box ticked. It's still, it was still a holy grail aspect to it. So I think there's a good chance he would have been tempted away the following summer or two if they had not won that Champions League. I think that gave him a sense of, okay, I can chalk up the first half of my career as very acceptable. So I think that's one of the great sliding door moments that will never, obviously. I mean, I'm speculating, Ger. I mean, he could have turned around from the Chelsea summer the year before and have been so glad he didn't make the move and so relieved. But I just wonder, he was that good and that ambitious and that driven. I think Champions League allowed him to hang around a good deal longer.
Well, like it's, I don't know, like you go back and you look at his autobiography, and I'm not sure that a Champions League win actually helped him stay at the club. I think it actually accelerated the idea that Steven Gerrard felt he had conquered the game with Liverpool. This was the final boss, winning a really important trophy with Liverpool, and they had accomplished that, and they'd accomplished it in unbelievable fashion. And you get a Chelsea bid in that summer as well, £32 million, which would have been a British transfer record in July 2005, which obviously would have turned Chelsea into an unbelievable team. They win the league anyway the next season. It would have been a guaranteed Premier League winners' medal for Steven Gerrard had he gone that summer. And he hands in a transfer request. Like, he rings his agent and he says, I'm going to find out whether they want to sell me, put in a transfer request. And that's what happens. But it's only when the blowback occurs and when Gerrard realises just how controversial this might be for him to leave Liverpool is when he changes his mind.
Bear in mind that, like, players of his stature putting in transfer requests isn't actually, I want to transfer in every instance. It is partly, are you going to give us the money to compete with Chelsea, who are absolutely spending hand over fist at the moment? Are you going to back the manager who's just won the Champions League? So there's probably a little bit of politics going on there. And also, I do think he probably wanted to get paid more. Like, he's just been the one who has finally released that pressure valve, delivered their 5th Champions League, transformed the club from a club who under Houllier had reached a certain level but were never really going to realistically compete with Alex Ferguson or Wenger or what was happening, Abramovich's money. And so are you going to ruin your club, or are you going to use the political capital that you've just gained? Like, I actually, I agree with everything you said there about how at the end of his career he's probably quite grateful for the fact that now he will always be a legend. If he had joined Real Madrid, say, or if he'd joined Milan instead of it being Chelsea that he was always linked with, I think he could have survived as a Liverpool legend and even come back later on in his career. And that would have been a very interesting career path, I think. But at that stage, the best English players, with the obvious exception of McManaman, never really looked. When did Beckham go? Has Beckham already gone at that stage? Or is
07. Oh, sorry, Beckham's gone. Beckham goes to America in 07. Beckham's gone about 03.
Right, okay. So there's a pathway there. Like, definitely, if you join Chelsea, the Liverpool fans will never forgive you, because it looks like you're just doing it for the money and you're just doing it to win a league title. And that's tarnished because they were already league champions. Whereas, if he doesn't slip and he wins the league title, he is undoubtedly Liverpool's greatest ever player for ending the famine twice. Like, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see what type of manager he makes when Liverpool eventually stupidly appoint him.
Yeah. The move abroad is an interesting idea. I agree. I think there might have been a boy done good. Look at him doing it for Real Madrid, and he'll come back to us when he's 31 aspect to it. But yeah, if he'd gone to Chelsea, where else could he have gone in England? Chelsea were dominant. Like Arsenal, I don't know, would they have had the money or wanted to spend that money? In a way, Chelsea was his only option, and that that would have been ugly for him. There's no doubt.
I think so.
Could Man United have signed him?
Well, he wouldn't have gone to Manchester United, surely. Like I think.
Would he not?
Like I think your point
Nah,
is very valid about this being a bargaining chip. The transfer request just being stump up a club record wage for me, and I will stay. And as well as that, I think he might have been a little bit spooked by the response to the transfer request getting leaked as well, and just realising this is a proper grenade with Liverpool fans. Imagine if that was a Manchester United linked transfer request.
There's about 9 other players on the bench in the final 2 years later who are bought by Benitez in the meantime. Pepe Reina, Agger, Mascherano, Pennant, Bolo Zenden, Dirk Kuyt, Peter Crouch and Craig Bellamy all joined the club between the final that we're about to watch and the final 2 years later. So the injection of money comes and the investment comes, and you have to kind of think that it's come almost as a direct correlation to the fact that their best player is threatening to leave.
God, though, they're that list of players, they are such of a level, aren't they?
It's
like that's just not a league-winning squad. Mascherano aside, maybe.
Yeah, so that's obviously what happens 2 years later. After that, AC Milan get their revenge. So it's hard to read into this as a huge sliding doors moment from an AC Milan perspective too much, because they do manage to get the job done again anyway 2 years later. We just want to wrap up on one last section, which is our over-under section. I'm going to give you each 2 rapid-fire questions, lads, and you're going to tell me if these things are overrated or underrated. We will start with you, Joe. Hernan Crespo, after the evidence of this game, overrated or underrated?
Oh, in this game, Chelsea are paying half his wages for him not to play for Chelsea. So on that basis, I would say under.
I think you're bang on there. Mid-2000s Pirlo, Ger. Like this particular version of Andrea Pirlo, underrated or overrated?
I rate Pirlo and the performance that he puts in the semi-final of the World Cup 12 months after this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. So I think he can only ever be underrated unless you rate him as like one of the best midfielders of all time. Sensational and beautiful to watch. Not as dominant in the second half of this game as he needed to be to win the Champions League. But
Joe, the most important one to you, John Arne Riisa's hairstyle, overrated or underrated?
I completely underrated how terrible this was. I remember it at the time. I mean, he's lucky Twitter wasn't around, or this would be just such a meme. Like, I'd forgotten. He arrived, everyone knew this flaming, brilliant carrot top look. He was great. And then, what colour would you say his hair is in the 2005 Champions League final? And what's he trying to do with it?
It's got like spots of yellow on his head. It's strawberry blonde in parts.
But it's brown. It's predominantly like he's trying to like go for. Oh no, I'm brown. I've got brown hair.
Don't ditch the ginge is what I'm saying, John Arne. Like don't ditch the rest of us there. That was a particularly harrowing moment in my childhood, seeing that Riisa had fled the camp. I was like, be proud, Riisa. Final one to you, Ger. Overrated or underrated? Carlo Ancelotti.
Are we sure Carlo Ancelotti is a good manager?
Exactly.
We just did the 1999 game where he was in charge of that Juventus side that had like one of the greatest collections of teams of midfielders of all time. And no, he wasn't very good in that game. No, he's not very good in this game. He blows a 3-0 lead against a very mediocre side.
So overrated is what I'm hearing there from Ger on Carlo Ancelotti. Ger and Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much. That is it from the OTB Classic Game Club for today. We'll chat to you next time.